Okay, so let's talk about factoring when the number in front of x squared, so the coefficient in front of x squared, is not 1. Now, let me be clear, because I know how you guys are operating. So your next year's teacher wrote the steps to this. But because of the way that I know that you guys think about math, my biggest concern is that you will get confused between what we did yesterday and what we're doing today. So what we're doing with the previous lesson and what we're doing with this current lesson. So I switched the terms. So if you notice, I switched in step 4, I switched A times C to be the number on the bottom and B to be the number on the top. So that is consistent with what we did yesterday or the previous lesson. Okay. So once you guys have a good grasp of factoring, then I will revisit this and show you how your teacher next year wants you to do it. Okay. But for right now, like, it's really important just for me to get you guys to master factoring. Okay. So I'm going to first look at my factoring example. And what I notice is that I can factor out a greatest common factor of 2 out of both of my terms. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you both ways. So I'm going to show you guys, remember I did in the last, when I talked about when A was equal to 1, so when the coefficient of x is 1, like, there's a way to do it by factor by grouping, right? Same thing here. There's a way to do this by factor by grouping instead of bottoms up. But as a department, we're looking at you guys doing this process of bottoms up because it's just a little bit quicker when it comes to factoring. But it's also like memorizing steps. So it's like 6 one way, half a dozen another. But in the end, the most important thing I think is that when it comes to state testing and, calculus and SAT, all these standardized testings, I think it's better for you to be able to do it quicker. But I'm going to show you the way that, so we'll do the first way, which is option 1, just for an example. I shouldn't call it option 1 because I'm really not giving you an option, but we can do it by factor by grouping. And this is how we do it. Okay, so maybe I could write grouping better. Okay, so we still draw our x. Okay, and we put our b term on the top and our a times, that's not right. This should be 5. And our a times c term on the bottom. And then I want 2 numbers that multiply. So here's A and C and here's B. So I want 2 numbers. I should not abbreviate that either. 2 numbers that multiply to -10 and add to 9. Okay. And in this case, my factors of 10 are 1 and 10, 2 and a better drawn 5. Okay, so I could have a positive 10 and a negative 1. So if I were to do this by factor by grouping, I would have left my 2 out in front. I would have copied down my 2x squared. But instead of my 9x, I would have put plus 10x minus 1x and then a minus 5. So I would have used my 10 and my negative 1 inside my my parentheses in place of that 9x. Okay, so then I could factor by grouping, and I would have 2, and I have a 2x and an x plus 5, and then a minus 1 and an x plus 5. And then what you would notice is that there's 2 terms here, and what's in common is a x plus 5. And then what I'm left with is a 2x minus 1. And that is actually your answer, but in a factor by grouping way. Okay, so now what's the way that I want you guys to do it? I want you guys to do what's called bottoms up, which is very, very similar to this. but slightly faster. So I would do the same thing. I'd still have my little box, okay, or my little X, and I still have 9 on the top, and I still have negative 10 on the bottom. And so I'd still end up with 10 and negative 1. But the only difference is that what I do is I have X plus 10 and X minus 1. And I would divide by the value. Oh boy. Value. Oh my gosh. I cannot write right now. And obviously I can't write with an eraser. Value of A. So in this case, A is equal to 2 because that is the coefficient of X squared. So I'm going to divide everybody by 2. And then I'm going to reduce. So I get X plus 5 over 1 and X minus 1/2. I then take, this is where the bottoms up comes into play, because I take what's in the bottom, bring it up to the top as the coefficient of X. And I still have my 2 hanging out in front because that's my greatest common factor. So I'm left with X plus 5 and a 2X minus 1. And so I still actually get the same exact answer as I do with factor by grouping, but we're doing it using a way called bottoms up. I'm doing the factor by grouping to just show you how they all kind of connect together. I want you to do the X's, okay? And I want you to do the bottoms up method, okay? All right, so moving right along, there's not a greatest common factor here. So I will, and the reason why you pull out greatest common factors to start off with is because nobody wants to do any of that arithmetic. Okay, so 42, which is 21 times 2. That's what goes down there. So 1 and 42, 2 and 21, 3 and somebody, 16? No, that's 48. 14? Yes. 4 doesn't work. 5, 6, and 7. So negative 3 and negative 14. So I'd have X minus 3 and X minus 14. And I'm dividing them by my A term, which in this case is 2. And then I'm reducing. And X minus 7. And then I'm bringing, this is over 1, so I'm bringing what's in the bottom to the top, what's in the bottom to the top. So that gives me 2X minus 3 and an X minus 7. Okay? All right. Another one. So negative 12 goes in the top and 36 goes in the bottom. So 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 6 and 6. So obviously negative 6 and negative 6 work. So I have H minus 6 over 36 because that's my A term. H minus 6 over 36. So this gives me H minus 1 over 6 and H minus 1 over 6. So then I bring what's in the bottom to the top. And I get 6H minus 1 times 6H minus 1, which is a perfect square. So there are 2 of the same thing. So that's a quantity squared. Okay. All right. And that is it for this lesson.